Who invited her? I heard the whisper cut through the wedding reception like a knife. I pretended not to notice as I adjusted my Valentino dress, the one that cost more than my ex-boyfriend's monthly salary. I smiled to myself as I felt the weight of shocked stares follow me across the marble floor. 7 years earlier, that same voice had called me not good enough. Not good enough for their precious son. Not good enough for their prestigious family name. Not good enough to sit at their dinner table. But today I wasn't just good enough. I was better. Darling, the champagne isn't nearly as good as ours, my husband Thomas whispered in my ear, his hand possessively resting on the small of my back. At 45, he was 15 years my senior, distinguished with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of a man worth 9 figures. The same man who signed my ex-boyfriend's paychecks, or used to anyway. I still remember the exact moment everything fell apart. I was 22, working 3 jobs to put myself through business school. My apartment was a shoebox in the worst part of town, but I kept it spotless. I'd been dating Ryan for almost 2 years. Golden boy Ryan with his trust fund and his corner office promised by Daddy. That night, I had prepared dinner using the groceries I had carefully budgeted for. I'd even splurged on a bottle of wine that cost more than I usually allowed myself. I had news. I'd been accepted for an internship that could change everything for us. The knock on my door came at 7:38 p.m. Not Ryan's usual knock. This was sharper, more deliberate. "We need to talk," he said, not even looking at the dinner I'd prepared. His eyes barely met mine. "This isn't working anymore." "What isn't?" I asked, still holding the wine bottle I'd been about to open. "This. Us. My parents." He paused, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. "They've made it clear that my position at the company depends on certain expectations." My stomach dropped. "What expectations?" "You're not exactly what they had in mind for me, Olivia. You should understand. There's a certain image I need to maintain. My father has introduced me to Catherine Williams. Her father is on the board." I set the wine down slowly. "So I'm being replaced because I'm poor. Don't be dramatic. It's not just about money. It's about compatibility, background, connections. You grew up in a trailer park. You wait tables. My colleagues have started asking questions." "Your colleagues?" I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Or your father's colleagues?" His silence told me everything. Then it got worse. "My parents are right. We're just different worlds. I need someone who understands the life I'm building. Someone who won't embarrass me at corporate functions." Embarrass him. The word echoed in my mind like a slap. "You should keep the internship opportunity," he added as if offering charity. "But you should know, I put in a good word for you. Without that, with your background, you probably wouldn't have even been considered." I stood there, frozen, as he explained how everything I'd worked for was actually his doing, how my achievements were merely his generosity, how my dreams were cute but unrealistic. When he left, he didn't even look at the dinner getting cold on my second-hand table. 3 days later, I saw him at a restaurant with a blonde woman wearing pearls. His mother was there too, beaming with approval. They were laughing. I was invisible, carrying trays to the table next to theirs. Ryan saw me. I know he did. But he turned away, pretending I was just another nameless server. That night, I cried until my body had nothing left to give. Then I got up at 5 a.m. for my morning shift, went to class, worked my evening job, and fell asleep with my textbooks still open. But something had changed. A seed had been planted. Not of revenge, not yet, but of determination so fierce it scared me. I would never, ever feel that small again. I stopped measuring success by Ryan's standards. I stopped caring about impressing people who would never see past where I came from. Instead, I focused on becoming someone they couldn't ignore. And now, 7 years later, here I was, walking into Ryan's wedding reception as his boss's wife. Not just his boss's wife, actually. As of yesterday, I was the new executive director of acquisitions at Blackridge Enterprises, the company Ryan's family business had been desperately trying to partner with for years. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked, squeezing my hand gently. He knew everything. My history with Ryan, the humiliation, the pain. He knew this moment meant more to me than I could express. I smiled, feeling the weight of the diamond earrings Thomas had given me for our anniversary. I've been ready for 7 years. We approached the bride and groom, who were receiving guests near an ice sculpture of intertwined swans. Ryan's smile froze when he saw me. The champagne glass in his hand tilted dangerously. "Congratulations," I said, extending my hand to his bride, a woman who resembled his mother in almost every way. "I'm Olivia Richards, Thomas's wife, and as of yesterday, the new director of acquisitions at Blackridge." The glass in Ryan's hand shattered. The look on Ryan's face was worth every tear I'd ever cried over him. His new bride, Catherine, the board member's daughter he'd replaced me with, looked between us with dawning comprehension. "Olivia?" Ryan stammered. "I didn't realize you and Thomas were acquainted?" Thomas's laugh was warm but carried an edge of steel. "Acquainted? My wife is the most brilliant mind I've ever met in business. Found her analyzing market trends that my entire research department had missed. Married her a year later. Best decision of my life, professionally and personally." I watched Ryan's eyes dart nervously to his father across the room. The older man was already moving toward us, alarm evident in his rigid posture. "Mr. Richards?" Ryan's father extended his hand to my husband. "What an unexpected pleasure. We didn't realize you would be attending." "Last-minute decision," Thomas replied smoothly. "Olivia mentioned an old connection to the family. When I received Ryan's company-wide invitation, I thought we should pay our respects." Ryan's father paled slightly. I knew why. The invitation had been sent to every employee at Blackridge as a power move, Ryan showing off his family connections. He couldn't have known I was now married to the CEO. "How do you know my son?" Catherine asked me directly, her voice brittle with suspicion. Before I could answer, Ryan interrupted. "College acquaintance, very brief." I felt a familiar twist in my gut, the same feeling I'd had all those years ago when he'd erased me from his life. But this time, I had power of my own. "Actually," I said, smiling, "Ryan and I dated for almost 2 years. He was my first serious relationship." Catherine's perfect makeup couldn't hide her shock. Ryan's father coughed into his hand. "That was a lifetime ago," Ryan said quickly, "before I really understood what I wanted in a partner." I nodded. "True. You made it very clear what you wanted wasn't someone who grew up in a trailer park, worked 3 jobs to pay for school, and might embarrass you at corporate functions." The silence that followed was delicious. Catherine's eyes widened as she looked at her new husband. "You never told me you dated someone from—" She trailed off, unable to even say it. "It wasn't serious," Ryan insisted. "Serious enough that you came to my mother's funeral," I said quietly. "Serious enough that we talked about moving in together." Ryan's father cleared his throat. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for—" "I completely agree," I interrupted smoothly. "We're here to celebrate, not dredge up ancient history. Though I am curious, Mr. Henderson, did you ever tell your son that you approached Thomas about a potential merger last year?" The older man's face hardened. "Business matters aren't appropriate wedding conversation, my dear." Thomas smiled. "No, but timing is everything, isn't it? Fascinating that Ryan's wedding was scheduled just 3 weeks before the board votes on potential acquisitions." Ryan looked between his father and my husband, confusion evident. He had no idea his own wedding was being used as a business maneuver, a soft pitch to the CEO of Blackridge through social channels. "I don't understand," Catherine said, her perfectly manicured hand clutching her champagne glass. "Ryan said your company was eager to partner with Henderson Industries." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Is that what he said?" The orchestra began playing louder, signaling the first dance was approaching. Ryan's mother appeared, her face a mask of social grace under obvious strain. "The photographer wants the family," she said, then froze when she saw me. Recognition flickered in her eyes. She remembered the poor girl who wasn't good enough for her son. "Olivia," she managed, her smile so tight it looked painful. "What a surprise." "Mrs. Henderson," I nodded. "Lovely to see you again. I was just telling Catherine how close Ryan and I were before he ended things." "You remember," You had concerns about my background affecting his career prospects. Her face flushed. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. You were right about one thing, I continued. Background does matter in certain circles. That's why Thomas and I were so careful vetting acquisition targets for Blackridge. We wouldn't want to integrate with a company that values appearance over substance. The implication hung in the air. Ryan's father suddenly looked ill. If you'll excuse us, Ryan's mother said stiffly. The first dance is about to begin. As they walked away, I caught fragments of their heated whispers. Catherine was demanding answers from Ryan. His father was berating him in harsh undertones. Was that everything you hoped it would be? Thomas asked quietly, his hand warm against my back. I watched Ryan arguing with his new bride instead of preparing for their first dance. I saw his father frantically typing on his phone, no doubt calling an emergency meeting with his board. Not everything, I said, but it's a start. What none of them knew was that their family business, the one that had deemed me unworthy, was already in my crosshairs. And I wasn't just Thomas's wife or Ryan's ex. I was the architect of their downfall, and I had been planning it methodically for years. I had given Ryan my heart once. He had deemed it worthless because of where I came from. Now I was about to take everything his family had built, and I wouldn't need to shed a single tear to do it. I first met Thomas Richards 3 years after Ryan broke my heart. By then, I wasn't waiting tables anymore. I had graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a financial analysis firm. Nothing prestigious, but it was a foot in the door. What no one knew was how obsessively I'd studied Henderson Industries since the night Ryan walked out of my life. I knew their suppliers, their weaknesses, their over-leveraged positions. I understood their market vulnerabilities better than their own board did. When my firm was contracted to provide a small market analysis for Blackridge Enterprises, I saw my opportunity. Instead of delivering the bare minimum the contract required, I spent 3 sleepless weeks creating a comprehensive analysis that included a detailed strategy for acquiring 3 mid-sized companies, one of which was a key supplier to Henderson Industries. The senior analyst tried to take credit for my work, but I had anticipated that move and embedded my digital signature in the data modeling. When Thomas Richards himself called to discuss the anomalies he'd noticed in the report, I was ready. Your modeling predicted their Q3 collapse 3 months before it happened, he said, studying me across his massive desk. No one else saw that coming. Their inventory management system has fatal flaws, I explained. But that's not even their biggest vulnerability. He leaned forward. Which is? Their succession planning. The Henderson family business is headed by Alan Henderson, but his son Ryan isn't competent enough to take over. The board knows it, the market senses it, but they're locked into the succession by family dynamics. Thomas's eyebrow raised. You seem to have particular insight into Henderson Industries. I met his gaze steadily. I make it my business to understand weaknesses. What began as professional respect evolved gradually into something more. Thomas was brilliant, driven, and, unlike Ryan, valued substance over appearance. He didn't care that I came from nothing. He cared that I could see patterns others missed. When he proposed 2 years later, it wasn't just about love. It was a partnership in every sense. I want you on my executive team, he told me after placing the ring on my finger. Not because you're going to be my wife, but because you're the smartest person I know. I declined initially. You know what they'll say, that I slept my way to the top. He laughed. Let them. While they're gossiping, we'll be acquiring their companies. But I had my own plan forming, one that required patience. I want to earn it, I told him. I want a position that no one can question. So I worked my way up legitimately, taking positions under different executives, using my maiden name, building a reputation that had nothing to do with being Thomas's wife. All the while, I kept gathering intelligence on Henderson Industries. I discovered that Ryan's father had made a critical error 3 years ago, over-leveraging the company to acquire a manufacturing plant in Singapore that was now operating at a loss. They were keeping up appearances, but the company was bleeding cash. More importantly, I learned that Ryan had been promoted to CFO despite being woefully unprepared for the position. Classic nepotism that was driving the company further into trouble. 6 months ago, Ryan's father made his first tentative overture toward Blackridge, suggesting a strategic partnership. What he really wanted was a capital infusion disguised as a merger. Thomas recognized the desperation in the proposal and declined. Then came Ryan's wedding invitation, sent to every Blackridge employee, including Thomas, a not-so-subtle reminder of the social connections the Henderson family still maintained. "They're getting desperate," Thomas said, showing me the invitation. Using Ryan's wedding as a networking opportunity, I studied the thick cream cardstock with its gold embossing. "Let's go." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You want to attend your ex-boyfriend's wedding?" "I want to watch their faces when they realize who I've become." What I didn't tell Thomas was that I had already put the final pieces in motion. 3 days before the wedding, I presented my acquisition strategy to the Blackridge board, a strategy that included purchasing Henderson Industries' debt from multiple lenders, giving us controlling interest without the family's knowledge. The board approved unanimously. Thomas signed the papers immediately, though he gave me a knowing look. "This seems personal," he said quietly after the meeting. "Business is always personal," I replied. "You taught me that." The night before the wedding, Thomas surprised me with news of my promotion to Executive Director of Acquisitions. "The board insisted," he said. "Your strategy was flawless." I accepted with a smile, knowing that my first official act would be dismantling Henderson Industries and selling its assets to competitors, all except the original factory Ryan's grandfather had built. That I planned to turn into affordable housing for working families trying to escape poverty. As Ryan and Catherine prepared to cut their wedding cake, I excused myself to make a phone call. "Execute Phase 2, I told our legal team. "Transfer all debt holdings to our Singapore subsidiary immediately." By Monday morning, Henderson Industries would receive notice that their loans had been called due in full. By Wednesday, when Ryan returned from his honeymoon, he would find his office packed up and security waiting to escort him out. I returned to the reception just as the cake was being served. Ryan's father was watching me, suspicion evident in his expression. "Is everything all right, Olivia?" Thomas asked when I rejoined him. I smiled, accepting a piece of wedding cake from a passing waiter. "Everything is perfect. This is the sweetest day." I took a bite of the cake, overpriced and flavorless, just like the groom. The wedding band was playing a slow jazz number when Ryan's father cornered us near the champagne fountain. His usual composure had cracked, replaced by barely contained panic. "Thomas," he said, his voice tight. "Might I have a word in private? Business matter." Thomas smiled politely. "Alan, it's your son's wedding. Surely business can wait until Monday." "I'm afraid it can't," he insisted, glancing nervously at me. "It's regarding the proposal we discussed last month." "Ah," Thomas nodded. "Well, Olivia is our new Executive Director of Acquisitions. Anything you'd like to discuss with me should include her as well." Alan Henderson's face paled. "Executive Director of... Since when?" "Since yesterday," I answered sweetly. My first official task was reviewing Henderson Industries' financials. Fascinating reading. The older man's hands trembled slightly. "Those are confidential." "Not to your creditors," I replied. "And Blackridge now holds the majority of your company's debt." It took a moment for my words to register. When they did, Alan grabbed Thomas's arm. "This is some kind of joke." "I assure you it's not," Thomas said, removing the man's hand from his sleeve. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation Monday morning at Blackridge. 9 o'clock? Ryan's father looked like he might collapse. "You can't do this. That company is my legacy. My family's name. A legacy built on exploiting suppliers and valuing pedigree over talent," I said quietly. "Yes, I'm intimately familiar with your family's values, Mr. Henderson." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "This is about Ryan. About him breaking up with you." I laughed softly. "No, this is about business. Your company is failing because you put your unqualified son in charge of finances he doesn't understand. Your Singapore expansion is hemorrhaging money. Your succession plan is driving your stock price down. These are facts, not feelings." Thomas placed his hand supportively on my back. "Blackridge doesn't make acquisition decisions based on personal history. We're simply capitalizing on a vulnerable asset. But Alan Henderson wasn't listening to Thomas anymore. His eyes were fixed on me, comprehension and fury fighting for dominance in his expression. "You engineered this," he hissed. "You manipulated your way into Blackridge to destroy us." "I earned my way into Blackridge," I corrected him. "The destruction of Henderson Industries is entirely your family's achievement. I'm just the one who noticed it was happening." Across the room, I saw Ryan watching us, concern etched on his face as his father became increasingly agitated. He excused himself from a conversation with his bride's parents and began making his way toward us. "What's going on?" Ryan demanded when he reached us, placing a protective hand on his father's shoulder. "Your father is upset about some business news," Thomas explained smoothly. "Perhaps this isn't the best time." Ryan looked between us, confusion evident. "What business news?" I met his gaze directly. "Blackridge has acquired controlling interest in Henderson Industries. We'll be implementing significant changes effective immediately." The color drained from Ryan's face. "That's not possible. We haven't agreed to any acquisition." "We didn't need your agreement," I explained. "We purchased your debt from multiple lenders. As of this morning, we control 63% of your company's obligations. The board will be informed tomorrow that those debts are being called due." Ryan stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "This is revenge." I shook my head. "This is business, Ryan. Nothing personal. Isn't that what you told me when you decided I wasn't good enough for your world? That it was just about compatibility and background?" His new bride appeared at his side, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness that cracked when she saw her father-in-law's distress. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice tight. "Nothing for you to worry about, Catherine," Ryan answered automatically, the same dismissive tone he'd once used with me. I watched something flicker in her eyes, the first hint that she might one day understand exactly what kind of man she'd married. "Actually," I interjected, "as a new member of the Henderson family, Catherine should be aware that the company is now under Blackridge control. Major restructuring will begin next week." Catherine looked sharply at her husband. "What is she talking about, Ryan? You told me Henderson Industries was financially solid." "It is," Ryan insisted. "This is some kind of hostile takeover attempt." Thomas chuckled. "It's not an attempt if it's already accomplished, and it's not hostile, it's just business." Ryan's father seemed to age a decade in minutes. "We can negotiate. There must be some arrangement." "The time for negotiation was before you leveraged your company to the breaking point," I said. "Besides, your negotiating position is severely compromised by the SEC investigation that will be announced Monday." This was the bombshell I'd been waiting to deliver. During my research, I'd discovered evidence of accounting irregularities dating back to when Ryan took over as CFO. Nothing malicious, just incompetence papered over with creative bookkeeping. I'd anonymously forwarded the evidence to regulatory authorities 3 months ago, timing it perfectly with our acquisition strategy. "What investigation?" Ryan demanded, panic rising in his voice. "The one examining the discrepancies in your Singapore facility's financial reports," I answered calmly. "The same reports you personally signed off on as CFO." Catherine turned to her new husband, horror dawning on her face. "Is this true? Are you under investigation?" "Of course not," Ryan snapped. "She's making this up." I reached into my clutch and removed a business card, handing it to Catherine. "This is the contact information for our legal department. You might want to have your own attorney reach out before the news breaks publicly." As Catherine took the card with trembling fingers, I felt no triumph, only a strange sense of completion. The circle that began the night Ryan told me I wasn't good enough was finally closing. Ryan grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "My family has connections." "Remove your hand," Thomas said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Ryan dropped my arm as if burned. "Your family's connections were always more illusion than reality," I told him softly. "Just like your company's financial health. Just like your qualifications to be CFO." As other guests began to notice the confrontation, Ryan's mother hurried over, social damage control her obvious priority. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her practiced smile strained. "Everything's fine, Mother," Ryan answered automatically. I met her gaze directly. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, you might want to speak with your husband. There have been some developments regarding the family business. She looked between her husband's ashen face and her son's barely contained fury, understanding something serious was unfolding. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, Thomas suggested diplomatically. We wouldn't want to disrupt the celebration. But the celebration was already disrupted. Guests were watching the tableau with undisguised curiosity. The perfect society wedding was unraveling as rapidly as the family business that had funded it. As Thomas and I walked away, I heard Catherine's strained whisper to Ryan. You promised there would be no surprises. You promised everything was stable. I didn't need to hear his response. I already knew what empty promises from Ryan Henderson sounded like. 3 months after Ryan's wedding, I stood in what used to be Alan Henderson's corner office. The view of the city skyline was spectacular, though the office itself was now stripped of the Henderson family photos and hunting trophies that once adorned it. The restructuring had been swift and comprehensive. Ryan and his father were both removed from their positions, though we allowed Alan to retain a ceremonial board seat, partly for continuity, partly because watching him sit silently through meetings as we dismantled his legacy was its own form of justice. The Singapore facility had been sold to cover debt obligations. The main production line was modernized and retained under Blackridge ownership. And the company headquarters, the building Ryan's grandfather had built, was now being converted into a mixed-use development with affordable housing units making up 60% of the residential space. Thomas joined me at the window, wrapping his arm around my waist. The board was impressed with your quarterly presentation. The Henderson acquisition is already showing better returns than projected. I leaned into his embrace. We retained more skilled workers than I expected. Once they realized merit would matter more than family connections, productivity improved dramatically. And what about you? He asked, studying my face. Did you get what you needed from this? It was a fair question. For years, proving myself to the Hendersons, proving they were wrong about me, had been a driving force. Now that I had succeeded beyond what even I had imagined possible, did I feel satisfied? I think I did, I answered honestly, but not in the way I expected. How so? I considered my answer carefully. When Ryan ended things, he made me feel like I was nothing without the right background, the right connections. For a long time, I wanted to prove him wrong by becoming something he would regret losing. Thomas nodded, waiting for me to continue. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Ryan and started being about me, about building something meaningful, about creating opportunities for people like me, people with talent but without advantages. I turned from the window to face my husband. The affordable housing project matters more to me than seeing Ryan's face when he lost his position. The scholarship program for first-generation college students matters more than knowing his family recognizes their mistake. Thomas smiled, the proud expression I'd come to treasure. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm just someone who refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on me, I replied. Later that week, I received an unexpected email from Catherine. She and Ryan had separated just 6 weeks after their wedding. The SEC investigation, the company collapse, and the social humiliation had been too much for their relationship to withstand. I thought you should know that Ryan finally told me the truth about your history together, she wrote. I'm sorry for how my family treated you at the wedding. I've learned some difficult lessons about the man I married and the values his family truly holds. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Catherine would find her own path forward, just as I had. The following month, I was invited to speak at my old community college, the same one I'd attended while working 3 jobs. Standing at the podium, looking out at students who reminded me so much of myself, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. Success isn't about proving others wrong, I told them, though that can be satisfying. It's about proving yourself right, about recognizing your own worth even when others fail to see it. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was working as a waitress to pay for classes, just as I had done. How did you do it? She asked. How did you not give up when everything was against you? I thought about Ryan, about his family, about the years of determination and work. I thought about Thomas recognizing my talent when others saw only my background. I thought about the company I was now helping to build. I stopped measuring my worth through other people's eyes, I told her, and I promised myself that one day I would be in a position to hold open doors for others that had been closed to me. The young woman nodded, understanding lighting her eyes. As I walked away, I realized the true victory wasn't in destroying what Ryan and his family had built. It wasn't even in my own success. It was in breaking the cycle, in using power to create opportunity rather than to exclude. Ryan had once told me I didn't belong in his world. He was right, but not for the reasons he thought. I didn't belong in a world built on empty appearances and inherited privilege. I belonged in the world I was now creating, one built on merit, opportunity, and the recognition that talent can come from anywhere. That night, as Thomas and I discussed our next acquisition target, I felt not the burn of old resentments, but the warm satisfaction of knowing exactly who I was and what I was worth. Some might call it revenge. I called it justice, the kind that doesn't just settle scores, but changes the rules of the